Wind tears across the crown of Vintém Hill. A paper kite rips loose from a young man's hands and tumbles away over the scrub, and he crashes downhill after it, thorns raking his arms. Then he stops dead. Below him, in a shallow hollow of flattened grass, two men in dark suits lie side by side, their eyes covered by dull plates of gray metal. Rewind 3 days, and 250 kilometers north. Campos dos Goytacazes, a sugar town on the flat coastal plain of Rio de Janeiro state, in the winter of 1966. Low buildings, dusty streets, a country under military rule and heavy censorship. Here, two men run a small workshop repairing radios and televisions. Their names were Miguel José Viana, 34, and Manuel Pereira da Cruz, 32. Both were electronics technicians, respected in their trade. Both married, both fathers. Neighbors described them as serious men, not drinkers, not gamblers. Men who took apart machines to understand exactly how the world worked. But the workshop was only half their life. Both men belonged to a circle in Campos that met for spiritist sessions, a practice common across Brazil then and now. They read about spirits, energies, and other worlds, and according to those who knew them, they had come to believe contact with superior beings was not only possible, but achievable by technical means. Friends later told police the group experimented, not only with seances but with electrical apparatus, with chemicals, with devices built by hand on a workbench. Notebooks were filled with diagrams and formulas. Somewhere in that mixture of faith and circuitry, the two technicians decided they were preparing for something specific. On the 17th of August, 1966, a Wednesday, the two men left Campos. They told their families they were traveling to buy materials and a car. Viana was carrying a substantial sum of money, far more than either man normally handled. They said they would be back soon. The road ran south along the coast, past cane fields and lagoons, toward the bay. Their destination was Niterói, the city that faces Rio de Janeiro across the water. They arrived that afternoon in a place where nobody knew them, carrying a plan they had written down, but explained to no one. A shopkeeper remembered them. The two men bought waterproof coats, a purchase that struck the seller as odd because the sky was clear and the season was dry. They paid, took the coats, and stepped back out into the sunlight. Whatever they expected on that hill, they expected to be covered. At a nearby bar, they bought a bottle of mineral water and asked for a receipt. The waitress who served them remembered one of the men clearly. He seemed anxious. He kept looking at his watch, again and again, as though the afternoon were running out. It was the last time anyone saw them alive. From the bar, the ground rises quickly. Vintém Hill stands above the streets of Niterói, steep, thick with grass and scrub, threaded by narrow footpaths. The climb is hard, even for men in work clothes. These two went up in suits and new raincoats in the last hours of daylight. That same evening, a woman named Bracinda Barbosa Coutinho de Souza was driving past with her children when they saw something above the hill. She described an oval object, orange, throwing off fiery rays, hovering over the high ground before it moved away. She reported it. Her account would attach itself to this case forever. Then, nothing. Thursday passed. Friday passed. Rain moved in over the bay and soaked the hill. In Campos, two families waited for men who had promised to return within days. No one searched Vintém Hill because no one had any reason to imagine they were there. Saturday, the 20th of August, an 18-year-old named Jorge de Pasta Alves climbed the hill to fly a kite. Pushing through the scrub near the top, he found two men lying on their backs, close together, in a small clearing of trampled grass. Their coats were beside them. Over their eyes lay flat masks of lead. The boy ran. Police reached the site with difficulty, hauling themselves up through dense vegetation on a slope with no proper road. By the time investigators stood over the scene, the hill had been exposed to 3 days of sun and rain. Whatever the men had done there, the weather had already begun erasing it. There were no wounds, no sign of a struggle, no torn clothing, no marks on the ground of a fight. The two men were dressed formally, lying in an orderly way, as though they had chosen the position. Their new raincoats had been folded and set aside. Everything about the scene suggested deliberate preparation. And then, the detail that would name the case forever. Each man's eyes were covered by a crude mask cut from sheet lead, shaped by hand, held in place by simple bands. Lead is what you use to stop radiation. It is what you use to shield eyes from something too bright or too dangerous to look at directly. Around them lay the rest of it. An empty bottle that had held water, a small packet containing 2 towels, still damp, a handkerchief, a few coins, almost nothing, and a plastic bag holding a notebook, its pages protected from the rain that had soaked everything else on the hill. Inside the notebook, in handwriting, was a schedule. Translated from the Portuguese, it read roughly 4:30 in the afternoon, be at the agreed place. 6:30, swallow capsules. After the effect, protect metals. Wait for the signal of the mask. 4 short lines, an entire plan written by men who never expected anyone else to read it. Read it again, and the questions multiply. Capsules of what? Protect which metals, and from what? And a signal, expected at a set hour, on a specific hilltop, requiring the eyes to be shielded. The note tells us they were waiting for something. It never once tells us what. Then investigators noticed what was not there. The large sum of money Viana had carried from Campos was gone. Only small change was found on the bodies. Either the men had spent it, hidden it, or someone else had climbed that hill and come down again with it. The autopsy should have settled it. It did not. Examiners found no injuries, no fractures, no evidence of violence at all. There was nothing to say how 2 healthy men in their 30s had stopped living within arm's reach of each other on the same evening in the same patch of grass. That left toxicology. If capsules had been swallowed, a chemical analysis could have identified them. But the samples sat while the laboratory worked through its backlog, and by the time attention returned to them, meaningful analysis was no longer possible. The single test that might have answered everything was never completed. The press seized it. Newspapers across Brazil ran the story of the men in lead masks, and it traveled from there around the world. In a decade already obsessed with flying saucers, the woman's account of an orange light above the hill fused with the notebook, the masks, and the silence of the autopsy. The first theory came from the men's own beliefs, that this was a ritual, that the capsules were meant to induce a state in which contact could be made, the masks to protect them from what they thought would arrive. In that reading, no one killed them. They killed themselves by accident, chasing something they were certain was real. The second theory is colder. A man carrying an unusual amount of money travels to a city where he is unknown and dies on an empty hillside with only coins in his pocket. Poison administered by someone they trusted would leave no wounds, no struggle, and no witnesses. Robbery has always been the simplest explanation. A third line of inquiry looked at what the men handled. Investigators heard that their circle had worked with chemicals and homemade devices, materials that can injure and kill without ever leaving a mark of violence. In that version, the hilltop was not a seance, but an experiment, and the masks were exactly what they appear to be: safety equipment. Every theory explains part of the evidence. None explains all of it. Ritual does not account for the missing money. Robbery does not account for the notebook written days in advance. An experiment does not explain why 2 men climbed a public hill in formal suits, sat down together, and waited for a signal at a set hour. Return to the masks themselves. They were made by hand, from sheet lead, by men who knew what lead is for. They cover the eyes and nothing else. Whoever cut them was not afraid of being touched, or burned, or struck. They were afraid of seeing, and they believed precisely that there would be something to see. The investigation ground on for months and then stopped. No cause of death was ever established. No one was charged. The file was shelved, and in the decades that followed, researchers who went looking for the original material reportedly found much of it incomplete or simply gone. Whatever the archive once held, it does not hold it now. Niterói grew. Houses climbed the slopes of Vintém Hill until they nearly reached the place where the two men were found. Children fly kites there still. Buses run below. Nothing marks the spot, and most people passing beneath it have never heard the names Miguel José Viana or Manuel Pereira da Cruz. 60 years on. The case is still open in the only way that matters, unanswered. Two skilled, careful men climbed a hill with a written plan, a bottle of water, and shields for their eyes. They kept to their schedule. Whatever they were waiting for it together, and the hill has never said whether it came.